You never think the maid will be the one to save your children's lives. That's not how these stories usually go. But then again, when life stops following your script, that's when it really begins. Brandon Keller had everything money could buy. A sprawling estate in the hills outside Denver, 3 successful tech startups under his name, luxury cars lined up like toys, and a sleek jet parked in a private hangar. But none of it mattered, not the wealth, not the accolades, not even the rare Italian espresso machine in his penthouse office, when it came to raising his 6-year-old twins, Lila and Mason. Brandon had been away on a business trip for nearly 4 weeks. It was supposed to be 10 days, but everything with investors in Tokyo ran long. His ex-wife, Harper, was supposed to have the kids, but she canceled last minute, flying to Ibiza with her new boyfriend. That's when Brandon called his housekeeper, Elena Rivera, and asked if she could stay with the twins full-time until he returned. Elena had been with the family for 3 years. In her 40s, gentle-eyed and soft-spoken, she was the kind of person who never made much noise in a room but somehow made everyone feel better just by being there. She had taken the job after her husband died in a car accident, working long hours to support her teenage son, who was now off at college on a scholarship she'd fought tooth and nail to help him earn. Brandon trusted Elena. He knew the kids liked her. He wired her extra money, told her to keep receipts for whatever they needed, and assured her he'd be back soon. But he didn't tell her when exactly. Not even his assistant knew the final return date. So when Brandon's jet landed unexpectedly on a warm Thursday evening, the sun dipping below the Rockies and his mind drained from back-to-back red ice, he didn't call ahead. He just wanted to be home. To see his kids. To rest. He rolled his suitcase up the stone path, noting the twin scooters tossed across the porch, and the smell of something homey, maybe baked bread or roasted chicken, drifting from the open kitchen window. A small smile tugged at his lips. The front door was unlocked. He stepped inside quietly, rolling his suitcase into the foyer, and that's when he heard it. Laughter. Giggles. A voice, not his daughter's or son's, but Elena's, singing softly. Curious, Brandon dropped his bag and moved silently down the hallway. The house was warm, brighter than usual, not in the lighting, but in something else. Something he couldn't quite name. Then he saw it. Standing in the archway to the family room, he froze. Elena was on her knees in front of the twins, both of whom were perched on stools, barefoot and covered in flour. She was holding a bowl in her lap while the kids dipped their fingers into the batter, laughing hysterically as she smeared a dab of it onto Mason's nose. But it wasn't just the scene that froze Brandon. It was what she was saying. You know, Elena said, brushing Lila's hair back gently, when your daddy was your age, I bet he used to love doing this with his mom. Maybe next time he's home, he can show you his favorite cookies. Daddy doesn't bake, Mason laughed. Maybe he used to, Elena said with a wink. You never know. Grown-ups forget the fun stuff sometimes. Brandon's chest clenched. He watched silently as Elena wiped the kids' hands, kissed the top of each head, and brought over the pan to slide into the oven. She moved like she belonged there, not like an employee, but like someone who had poured her heart into these children. Someone who had tried to fill the gaps he hadn't realized were gaping. He backed away, unnoticed, and stepped outside onto the porch, sinking onto the steps. He couldn't move. The guilt hit him like a wave. He had thought he was doing right by them, providing everything. Every toy, every comfort, every gadget. But he hadn't given them this. He hadn't laughed with them over cookie batter or sung lullabies when they couldn't sleep. He hadn't braided Lila's hair or built Legos with Mason in weeks. He had given them the world, except for himself. A minute later, the screen door creaked. Brandon turned. Elena stood there, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face paled slightly when she saw him. Mr. Keller, she said, startled. You're home early. He stood slowly. I didn't want to interrupt. She hesitated, unsure of his tone. I was just making a treat with them before bed. I saw, he said quietly. They looked happy. Elena gave a small, nervous nod. They've been doing really well. They miss you, of course, but they're strong. Brandon swallowed hard. You've done more than I asked. More than I even knew they needed. Elena shifted, uncomfortable. I just tried to keep things stable. I know transitions are hard for kids their age. You didn't just keep them stable, he said, stepping closer. You gave them love. Joy. You were there in ways I haven't been. Elena's eyes softened. You've been providing, sir. That matters, too. He looked down, shame washing over him. Maybe. But I don't want to just provide anymore. I want to be their father again. The door behind them creaked open. Daddy? Lila's voice was sleepy, her curls messy and her pink pajamas dotted with flour. Brandon dropped to his knees. Hey, sweet pea. Mason padded out behind her. You're back. Brandon opened his arms, and both kids ran into him, clinging tight. He hugged them harder than he ever had before, pressing his face into their hair. I missed you so much, he murmured, his voice cracking. So much. Elena turned away, giving them the moment. But her hand lingered on the doorframe, her eyes glassy. She had been the glue. The heart. The one who stepped in when no one else did. Brandon would never forget it. Not tonight. Not ever. Later that night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Mason curled around his dinosaur plushie and Lila with her thumb in her mouth and her other hand resting on Brandon's chest. He stayed lying there between them, afraid to move. The room was dim, lit only by the nightlight shaped like a glowing moon. He stared up at the ceiling, realizing how much of their world he'd missed. The tiny stickers above the bed, the scribbled drawings taped to the dresser, the stack of bedtime books with bent corners, these were the things they'd wanted to show him all along. And he hadn't seen any of it. Brandon had built a life trying to outrun failure, trying to ensure his kids would never feel the hunger or fear he once had as a boy in a broken home. He thought success meant security. He thought love could be wired in bank transfers and delivered in gift boxes. But love, he was learning, was in the ordinary. In bedtime stories and messy cookie batter. In lullabies sung off-key and tired arms carrying children up the stairs. That night, he didn't go back to his own room. He stayed there until the first light of morning crept through the window. At breakfast, the house felt different. Brandon came downstairs in sweatpants and a t-shirt, a far cry from the tailored suits and crisp collar shirts he always wore. Elena glanced up from the stove, visibly surprised. You're up early, she said. He smiled, rubbing his jaw. Didn't sleep much. Think I got flour in my ear. She chuckled softly, flipping pancakes. The twins love cooking with company. You should have seen Mason try to crack an egg yesterday. He told me last night he wants to be a chef, Brandon said, sitting at the table. Lila wants to be a vet. Apparently, they rescued a baby bird from the backyard. Elena nodded. It had a hurt wing. They named him Tofu. He's with a wildlife rehabber now. Brandon was stunned. He'd never even heard about the bird. Or the chef dreams. Or any of it. Elena, he began, then paused. Do you ever feel like you know my kids better than I do? She looked at him carefully. I think they've just had more time with me lately. You've been busy. Too busy, he admitted. The twins came barreling in then, full of energy and squeals. Breakfast was filled with chatter, syrupy fingers, and shared stories about their adventures while Dad was gone. Brandon listened to every word, laughing along, asking questions, memorizing their faces. After Elena cleaned up the kitchen, Brandon asked her to join him on the porch. She hesitated. Is something wrong? No, he said quickly. Not at all. I need your help. But not as a maid. Elena followed him outside, where they sat on the same porch steps from the night before. The early sun was gentle, warming the stone beneath their feet. Brandon clasped his hands, searching for the right words. I built this empire, Elena. But I've realized I'm failing where it matters most. I need to be present. Not just for my kids, but for myself. She said nothing, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. I was thinking, he went on, that I want to be here more. Cut back on travel. Maybe even bring my next project in-house so I can work from home. That sounds like a big change, she said carefully. It is, he nodded. And I can't do it alone. I need someone who knows the kids' routines, their needs. Not as a maid. As a partner in this house. Her brows rose. What are you asking? Brandon turned to her, earnest. Would you consider being their nanny? A proper position. Better pay, full benefits. You'd have full authority over their schedule, help with learning, meals, everything you've already been doing, just recognized and respected as the critical role it really is. Elena looked away for a moment, blinking rapidly. That's generous. But I'm just a housekeeper. No, Brandon said firmly. You're the person who saved my kids' hearts while I was busy chasing something hollow. She exhaled slowly. Let me think about it. I do have a son I visit often. He's in school back east. Of course. Take time. No pressure. He smiled. But if it means anything, you'd be helping me become the father they deserve. She nodded, quietly moved. Thank you. That afternoon, Brandon took the twins to the park by himself. He pushed them on swings, raced them down slides, and sat cross-legged on the grass listening to Mason explain the difference between Triceratops and Stegosaurus. He had to Google it later, but that wasn't the point. At bedtime, the kids insisted he read their favorite book twice. He didn't mind. He'd read it 10 times if they wanted. As he tucked them in, Lila looked up at him and whispered, "You're different now." He froze. What do you mean? You were gone, but now, you're really here. He kissed her forehead. I'm not going anywhere, baby girl. I promise. Mason tugged on his sleeve. Can we make cookies again tomorrow? Brandon grinned. Only if you don't put flour in my ear again. They giggled, and he turned off the light. Downstairs, Elena was gathering her things to leave for the night. He met her by the door. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. Just, think about staying. For them. For me. She gave a gentle smile. I already have. He watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fleeting kind. The real kind. The kind that stays. 2 weeks passed, and the house was almost unrecognizable, not because anything had changed structurally, but because of the energy that lived inside it now. Brandon started working from home. He converted the unused study near the kitchen into a bright, functional office and kept the door open so the kids could pop in any time they wanted. Mornings started with breakfast together. No more silent dining while checking emails. Instead, it was banana pancakes, spilled orange juice, and debates over whether Lila's doll or Mason's toy robot would win in a race. Elena officially accepted the nanny position. Brandon insisted on rewriting the contract himself, giving her a title that reflected the respect she had earned, Family Care Director. She blushed when she saw the letterhead but said nothing, only nodded in her quiet, composed way. He'd offered to double her salary. She tried to decline, but he insisted. Do you know how many hours I've billed tech companies for half the effort you put into raising my kids? He joked. She laughed then, really laughed, and something about the sound struck Brandon. It was the first time he'd heard it fully, without it being softened by professionalism. Life was starting to settle into a new rhythm. But healing isn't a straight path. One afternoon, Brandon found a crayon drawing on his desk. It was taped to the edge of his monitor, almost like a trophy. He smiled until he looked closer. The drawing showed 3 figures, Lila, Mason, and someone in a dress with dark hair. They were all holding hands under a big sun. In the corner, far off to the side, stood another figure, taller, in a suit, frowning. He knew instantly that was supposed to be him. Later that evening, when the kids were watching a cartoon in the den, he knelt beside them. "Hey," he said gently, holding up the drawing. "Did one of you make this for me?" Lila nodded proudly. "I did." "It's beautiful," he said softly. "Can I ask something, though? Why am I standing over there?" Mason looked down, avoiding his eyes. "You were always gone," Lila said simply. "So I put you far away." Brandon swallowed hard. "But," Lila added, "you're not far away anymore. Next time I draw you, you'll be right here." She reached out and took his hand. It broke something in him. That night, after they were in bed, he went into the garage. Dusty boxes lined the walls, old things he hadn't touched since the divorce, since building his fortune, since becoming someone he barely recognized. He pulled out an old wooden box filled with photos. Some were of Harper, of their wedding, of the early years when love still lived between them. But most were of the kids as babies, first baths, first steps, birthday cakes, sleepy car rides. And in too many of them, he wasn't there. The next morning, Brandon sat down with Elena at the kitchen table. "I want to talk about the kids," he said, sliding one of the drawings toward her. She looked at it and smiled faintly. "Lila's getting better at proportions." He chuckled. "Yeah, she's got my frown down, too." Then he grew serious. "I want to do more than just be present. I want to be involved. I don't even know Lila's favorite book or what Mason's afraid of at night. You know all of it. Can you teach me?" Elena blinked, caught off guard. "You don't need me to teach you. You just need to show up." "I'm showing up now," he said. "But I don't want to mess it up. I've missed too much already." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Then start small. Pick them up from school. Help with homework. Sit with them when they're frustrated, not just when they're happy." Brandon nodded slowly. "I can do that." And he did. He started volunteering in Mason's classroom for science projects. He helped Lila make a cardboard castle for her book report. He learned how to braid her hair, badly at first, but she giggled through it. He started taking Mason to the barbershop instead of sending the driver. They went to the movies, to the zoo, to Saturday morning farmers markets. Brandon stopped being the faraway man in drawings. He was in the middle now, arms around his children. One night, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Lila accidentally dropped a bowl, and it shattered on the tile. She looked up, frozen, lips trembling. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "Please don't be mad." Brandon knelt beside her, picked her up, and held her close. "It's just a bowl," he said softly. "You're way more important than any bowl." Elena watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes. Later that night, as they shared a cup of tea at the dining table, Brandon glanced at her. "You know," he said, "I used to think people worked for me. That money made me the one in charge." Elena gave a soft smile. "And now? Now I know I work for them. My kids. Their hearts. Their future. That's the only job that matters." She nodded. "Then you're finally rich in the ways that count." Brandon looked around, the quiet house, the still night, the feeling of peace in his chest, and for once, he believed it. He wasn't just a millionaire. He was a father. Months passed, and with every passing day, the house became more than just a home, it became a sanctuary of healing. Brandon wasn't just present anymore, he was involved, deeply and lovingly. He learned things he never used to pay attention to. How Mason didn't like thunder but pretended he was brave for Lila's sake. How Lila sometimes got overwhelmed in big crowds and would hold her breath to keep from crying. And Elena remained the steady soul of the household. She never overstepped, never tried to replace anyone. She simply filled the spaces that were once empty with compassion, structure, and quiet wisdom. One Friday evening, after dinner and before bedtime, Brandon gathered the kids in the living room. The fire crackled softly, and they curled up on the couch with popcorn. "I have a surprise," Brandon said, pulling out a large, wrapped frame. "What is it?" Mason asked, eyes wide. Brandon unwrapped it and held up a newly drawn picture, this time sketched by a professional artist he had hired. It showed Lila and Mason in the center, holding hands. On one side stood Brandon, smiling, holding Mason's shoulder. On the other side stood Elena, arms around Lila. Behind them was a big tree, and under it, a sign, "Our family." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Is this us?" "It is," Brandon said softly. "Because families don't always look one way. Sometimes the people who love you the most aren't the ones you expected." Mason looked up at Elena. "You're in our family too." She hesitated, but Brandon nodded. "She always was." Elena's lips trembled as she knelt down. "If you'll have me, I'll be in your family forever." Lila threw her arms around her. "We already do." It was more than a picture. It was a declaration, of love, of redemption, of the kind of wealth that no dollar sign could ever measure. But not everyone was happy about the changes. One rainy afternoon, Harper showed up unexpectedly. Her high heels clicked sharply against the marble as she walked through the front door like she still owned the place. Brandon was in the kitchen, slicing fruit with Mason. "Harper," he asked, surprised. "You didn't call." "I don't need to call," she said, brushing rain from her coat. "They're my children too." The twins came running, unsure whether to smile or hide. Harper crouched down, fixing Lila's hair. "You've gotten taller." "And what is this? Is that paint under your nails?" "We were painting rocks in the backyard," Mason offered proudly. "Rocks," Harper repeated, clearly unimpressed. She straightened and scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Elena, who had just entered with folded laundry. "Oh," Harper said coldly. "Still here?" Elena stiffened. "Just finished folding the kids' clothes." Harper turned to Brandon. "We need to talk." They stepped outside to the patio. Rain tapped gently on the awning above. "What's going on?" Brandon asked. "I heard from a friend that you've basically let the maid move in. That you've made her some kind of third parent." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Elena isn't the maid. She's the person who held this family together while you and I were both too selfish to see what the kids really needed." Harper scoffed. "Don't preach to me, Brandon. You think one picture and a few school pickups make you Father of the Year?" "I don't care about titles," he said quietly. "I care about them. And Elena's the reason they still smile. So yes, she's part of this family. You don't have to like it, but you do have to respect it." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're changing." "I hope so," he replied. Harper left without hugging the kids. She never liked staying where she wasn't in control. Brandon watched her car disappear down the long drive, then turned back toward the house. Inside, the twins were curled up beside Elena, reading a picture book. He paused for a moment, just watching. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, Brandon knocked on Elena's door. She opened it cautiously. "I've been thinking," he said. "About all of this. About you." She held his gaze, waiting. You've done so much for us. For them. And I know I've asked a lot. But there's something I haven't asked yet. Her heart caught in her throat. What is it? He stepped closer, nervous for the first time in a long time. Would you stay? Not just as a nanny. Not as staff. But as family. For good. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Are you asking me to be with you? I'm asking you, he said, to help me build a life that's not broken anymore. A life with love. A home that's real. Tears welled in her eyes. Brandon. You don't have to answer tonight. Or tomorrow. But know this, I'm not going anywhere. Not from them. Not from you. She nodded slowly. Okay. And for the first time, Brandon didn't feel like a man returning to a house. He felt like a man returning home. It's never too late to show up for the people who matter. True wealth isn't counted in money, but in memories, in presence, and in the love we build brick by brick, day by day. Sometimes the family we choose heals the wounds left by the ones who walked away. And sometimes, the quietest people in the room turn out to be the ones holding up the whole world.